All right, welcome back to our Simple Healthy Life podcast. And today, MJ, I was hoping that we would discuss a little bit about the myth of Sisyphus. And this one is pretty interesting for us because I think that there are a lot of parallels that we can find within this myth to our life. And ultimately, I think the best question to strive for an answer today is this. How do we resolve the tension between our desire to find purpose and living in a universe which fails to provide us clear answers on that?
So fundamentally, are you talking about the meaning of life? Like the purpose of life?
I think so.
And there's no real, like, we don't have that answer? Or are you talking like you could do all of the things right and still get hit by a bus? You could work your whole life towards something and maybe not have it work. Mm-hmm. You could be intentional about all the things in the whole world and still have no justice, no order. Is that kind of the concept?
Well, let's just start here. The alarm rings at 6 a.m., startles you awake. After a brief moment, the weight of the day kind of sits in. You start thinking about all the things, all the obligations that you have to get to. It feels all too familiar in a lot of ways. Get out of bed, brush your teeth, get dressed, maybe not in that order. But you know the day will probably move faster than you originally hope, right? Challenges are faced, some emotions are hurdled upon, or maybe nothing eventful happens at all, truly. And if you're lucky, you get to the end of the day and you have a moment of clarity in which, for many of us, that question comes up. Is this it? Am I going to keep doing this day in and day out? Is this what life is? And I think even people who've been great architects of their life have that question pop up.
Oh, great. Okay. Now I'm fully understanding. Yeah, that's real. And you know what's weird? I was just talking to someone this morning I hadn't seen in a while, and I was like, what's new? And they were like, nothing. And they really feel that way. Like they're on repeat, Groundhog Day. You know, they're doing the same thing every day. And the question, like you're asking, is like, is this it? And interestingly enough, like, maybe it is. We don't know. We don't know. And even if you have this milestone, right, you're working towards this milestone, and then you hit the milestone, and then 6 months later you're laying in bed, what are you doing? You're thinking the same thing.
Sure.
Okay, is this it? Even though it was cool, and now I'm better, and I've got, grew, or got the job, or got the house, or I got the thing I wanted, you still end up with that kind of feeling. You think it's because the universe doesn't give us the answer? Or is it because we're left to define the answer?
I think it's hard for us to know, which is why this tension exists, right? The tension between, is this it? Is there a greater meaning here? What is that? And the universe's silence on that.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely. I think about a little bit of it as, some of me thinks if we had the answer, it would be worse. Because what if it doesn't line up with what you wanted it to be? Right? No, you're supposed to just be the ant. That's it. You're just supposed to be the ant. You're going to crawl around and do your ant things and build your ant colonies and talk to other ants. And then at the end, the boot comes in and boom, later, ant. that would suck. We don't want that.
No.
Right? And even if the other one is like, no, actually, I'm just going opposite end of the extreme, right? No, you're a god, and you're just not smart enough to figure it out. So you're going to toil around and be the ant until you can figure out that you are the god. And for many of you, most of you, all of you, you won't, because you don't have the tools or you can't figure it out. So yeah, guess what? You're back to just toiling around, but the universe doesn't tell you either of those. It doesn't give you any of the answers. It's just silent on the subject. Sure. But it does leave you to your own choice. You're not defined by whether you're the ant or something else. And I think that's valuable in itself.
Sure. This is why the myth of Sisyphus is so interesting and engaging for a lot of people. And as some background for listeners, this is a myth, a Greek mythology, and it's about a prideful king who essentially cheated death and kind of wasn't super kind to the gods, but was ultimately like a decent man, actually. And upon living his, I think his full life, actually, he gets condemned by Zeus to spend the rest of eternity in the underworld with one task and one task alone. And this is to push a very large boulder up a hill. A mountain, yes. And right before he reaches the very tippity top, the boulder falls back down, and he must repeat this day in and day out. And the obvious parallel here is that a lot of us find that our tasks are just that, tasks that we spend every day pushing the boulder up, only for it to fall back down and do it over and over and over. And perhaps sometimes, like you said, we do achieve these milestones, these goals, whatever it is, but yet that doesn't stop the fact that there is still yet another boulder to push. And it's a very interesting concept. And the famous philosopher Albert Camus talked about this in depth in one of his essays, and I was hoping that we would kind of bring this up as well, because he calls this concept the concept between the search for meaning and the lack of answers, the absurd, right? Because I think it is absurd in a lot of ways.
It's kind of funny. It's such a great word. Mm-hmm. It's absurd that you, the individual, feel as though you should be getting something that the universe, this massive and unending, this ain't going to give you. That's absurd. Mm-hmm. It's a riot that he uses that word. Yeah. I think, to back up a little bit on the actual myth itself, I think for people, we're trying to make sure we give you as much context as possible. One of the things, when I was kind of doing some homework on this, you've all seen the picture. It's out there. It's like you've come across it. We've come across it. It's just you close your eyes and picture the drawing of the man pushing the boulder uphill. Like it's on advertising. It's more prominent than when you first think about it. And in fact, after listening to this podcast, I'd be willing to bet you're going to see that picture pretty soon. Mm-hmm. So that myth is. So do you think that they wrote the myth? Why did they write the myth? Before we get into Camus' interpretation, what do you think they wrote it for? Control?
Well, yeah, there's something very special about these stories, especially Greek mythology is such an interesting thing, because I think that they, similar to how maybe the Bible or other religious texts are outlining feelings and experiences, these universal truths perhaps in story. I think Greek mythology does very much that too. They outline these human experiences that seem to transcend the culture and and even the time in which they are written, and they become this universal truth. And I think that's why we hold on to them in a lot of ways, right? They persist through time because there is so much core truth to them, and this is just another one of them, you know.
I think you're spot on, and I think this is one of the more interesting core truths that we can discuss. We'll get into it here in a second, but I really liked how Camus, the person that we're going to talk about next, he talks about it's less about answering the question and more about facing the question head on without escaping it. Right? So like, okay, now we know the question is there. We all know it. We all feel it inherently. We want purpose. The universe is under no obligation to give it to us, and in most times responds with silence. Right? That tension, the absurd. Hilarious. Great word. But what do we do in order to escape that tension? Right? And because we're talking about such a big, fundamental rock here, we're going to talk about the rock again in a minute, but because we're talking about something so fundamental, we do things like religion. Right? If the universe doesn't answer, we go, well, there's got to be a God. Okay, sure, fair, right? Or we do anything we can to escape that tension.
Sure.
Because we don't want the tension. And we're not going to get an answer, because that's the absurd part. We're going to look for it, and we're going to maybe even come to the conclusion that we believe it. Right? And I don't want to get into whether or not religion versus any of that, because belief is whatever, yours individually. But ultimately, like, that's what you're trying to solve for.
Right. And I think it's obvious that we look for the answers, right? It's obvious that we look for part 2 Sisyphus, and I'm like, okay, where is he now?
Yeah. Did he ever get off?
He is still pushing this rock, right? And I'm going to read this passage because I think it sets the stage of our discussion very well. And this is from Albert Camus' 1942 essay titled appropriately, The Myth of Sisyphus. And he gets into many different areas of the absurd and all of these other things. But this is basically the last paragraph here, and it's so powerful. There is no sun without shadow, and it is essential to know the night. The absurd man says yes, and his efforts will henceforth be unceasing. If there is a personal fate, there is no higher destiny, or at least there is, but one which he concludes is inevitable and despicable. For the rest, he knows himself to be the master of his days. At that subtle moment when man glances backward over his life, Sisyphus returning towards his rock, in that slight pivoting, he contemplates the series of unrelated actions which become his fate, created by him, combined under his memory's eye, and soon sealed by his death. Thus convinced of the wholly human origin of all that is human, a blind man eager to see, who knows that the night has no end, he is still on the go. The rock is still rolling. I leave Sisyphus at the foot of the mountain. One always finds one's burden again. But Sisyphus teaches the higher fidelity that negates the gods and raises rocks. He, too, concludes that all is well. This universe, henceforth without a master, seems to him neither sterile or futile. Each atom of that stone, each mineral flake of the night-filled mountain, in itself forms a world. The struggle itself towards heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. It's a lot.
That's a lot. But it when you break it down, what he's basically saying is the act of moving the rock is what's important. And if you're going to see your rock as punishment, and I think in a little bit he's talking about kind of the gods win in this regard, then the gods win. But if you can choose to move the rock just for the act of moving the rock, when you turn and walk back downhill, you can find intention and purpose and happiness, even though you know you have to go move the rock again. I think that's what he's trying to tell us, and I think we can all personify or relate to Sisyphus in some regard with this rock that we're just going to move every single day.
Right. I like what you said there, though, that if Sisyphus resigns to it being punishment, then it's a tragedy, right? This man condemned to do a hard task over and over and over, no end in sight. There's no meaning to the rock, in fact, which is, if decided this, then that is a tragedy, right? But if Sisyphus, and if he derives meaning to pushing the rock, right? If that's his task, and he declines any higher order, he declines any grand meaning, any meaning which he has to decipher or can't decipher, if he declines all of this and just says, I'm going to push this rock, then in fact it feels a lot better, right? And it's only unsettling to us because he's conscious, right? Because he is a person who has the ability to feel, and he's not a robot, right? If it's a robot doing the same task, it's like, okay, whatever, like
right.
That's a silly task, but it's not a tragedy.
Well, at the end when he says like, you must picture, what's the exact words you were?
Yeah.
You must picture.
One must imagine Sisyphus happy.
One must imagine Sisyphus happy, right? Okay, so when you read this myth, it's us that say he's not, right? There's nothing in the myth that says the dude's not happy. So we immediately personify it. What if you flipped it and said, this is my rock. This is my mountain. This is my opportunity to get stronger, to push this rock. And when people around me see that I'm pushing this rock, they'll know this is my rock and this is my mountain. And I'm the one that's going to push this rock. That sense of ownership is empowering.
Right.
Right. And I think, we're using the word rock and mountain, but use your own task and chore. If it's a task and chore and it's somebody else pressing it on you, it's tough. But when you own it, this is my rock, this is my mountain, this is what I do. It releases this burden, it releases this tension.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. And this is precisely the point I think Camus was trying to make. He's actually very against the idea of even like nihilism, essentially, that it all has no meaning, but he is kind of making a point against this external meaning, right? And this is prominent in all the ways. We have external meaning for almost everything, right? Once I get enough money in the bank, I'll be happy. Or once I get enough, once I lose enough weight, once I achieve enough friends or get recognition on XYZ, then I'll be whole, right? Then it will all be worth it, essentially. All the work that I put in, all the sacrifices I made, it will all be worth it once XYZ is achieved.
But that rock's not going over the other side of the mountain.
Never.
Never.
And so to be lucid, to be present, to be awake to the task itself is ownership, and is meaning, is the deepest of meaning, right?
Interestingly enough, like our modern neuroscience, to jump ahead 2,500 years, has like proven dopamine spikes during the act, not possession. And once you have it, your dopamine goes back down. It's spiking when you're in the act of doing these things, and that's telling us like this is when the feel good is. It's really we want to say, even in the myth, like, okay, you get the suffering, you get the thing, you got to push the rock uphill, but the truth is that's when we actually feel alive.
Right.
That's when we're really doing it, and it's just this tension about the why.
Right. I think too the most interesting part of this for me, obviously the last line, it's a famous line, one must imagine Sisyphus happy. That one is without a doubt the most famous line in the whole book. But this other one that is easily missed, I think, by many people is Camus talks about the descent, right? Sisyphus' descent each day to the rock at the bottom. And that one fascinates me, right? Because this is where it all happens, right? This is where Sisyphus's ownership of his task actually happens. He kind of doesn't have a choice, which is also interesting. Like, I don't know many people have broke that down, that Sisyphus doesn't really so much have a choice. I don't know if like his body just moves in the way to like push the rock up.
He's standing up at top and like, I'm not doing it again.
Yeah.
Stay down there.
I don't know how that works, but he does have a moment of reprieve on the way down, right? And so even if every other moment of his life is spent solely pushing, he doesn't get to sleep, eat, whatever, but he does get the descent, right? And that's a true moment of clarity. That's where he can be conscious, and that's when he can reflect. And if during that reflection, it's the gods have punished me, woe is me, this is hard, I don't deserve this, maybe one day it will end, maybe I'll eventually get the boulder up to the top of the mountain, right? It's interesting because I hadn't thought about that thought in a while, but the first thought I've ever had upon hearing the myth of Sisyphus was, I wonder if he's hopeful that one day he will get the rock to the top.
What if I told you that the fact that you wonder that is your way of escaping the absurd? Right? I'm hopeful that one day the universe will tell me why we're here. I'm hopeful that maybe when I die, I get to go to the other side and I'll learn what was the meaning of it all. Right? It's the same concept as religion. While we're alive, we hope that, pick whatever religion is correct, and heaven is waiting for you, or whatever your thoughts are. But it does come down to hope.
Sure.
And I think what Camus was saying is, F hope, when you truly throw it all aside, everything, hope, religion. I mean, he's cursed by the gods. He's got to come to terms with the fact that this is an eternity for him, right? And we don't really wrap our head around eternity very well. Then every night when he walks back down that mountain, I hope he's not hopeful. I hope he's just truly come to this point of freedom. And we've talked about this a couple different times, and it lines up perfectly with Man's Search for Meaning, right? Viktor Frankl. Mm-hmm. And he talks about it in his book. This is a man that was in Auschwitz. He was a doctor before he got there. He showed up on day one. They took everything he had, every single possession that he could possibly have, and then they took his family. And then they took his food, and then they took his rations, and then they took everything. And the only reason he got to live through this whole process was because he was a doctor. So they actually were using him on top of everything. And hope was completely gone. But his intention and his meaning was there still. And he talks about they can take everything from you with the exception of your meaning, whatever you choose.
Right. Again, this is my number one book, Man's Search for Meaning. It is a life-changing book without a doubt. So if you haven't read that book, I mean, it is certainly tragic. It is awful, but it provides such high resolution on suffering, one that you've never seen before, and yet somehow he comes out the other side with meaning, right? And so, yeah, you're put through the meat grinder, essentially. You're chopped up into little bits in every which way. Like you said, his family, basically gassed in front of him, everyone around him suffering. They're doing hard labor in those camps, 15 hours a day of just mining a railroad, essentially, on a single pea and some soup, right? And yet he's sitting there somehow creating meaning when, you're right, there is no external meaning. I mean, as far as he's concerned, he's dying there. He kind of resigns to this. In fact, because he's resigned to the fact that there almost is no hope, he derives meaning in those moments. So very similar to Sisyphus. So that's a great connection. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, and in the end, it's personal freedom, right? And that's what I was kind of saying at the beginning of this whole podcast. Like, the fact that we get to choose is what's important. Even Sisyphus, right? And it's almost like Zeus cursed him with the worst thing he could come up with, but he didn't think to put him in a prison for his own mind. So now Sisyphus gets to choose. This is my mountain. This is my rock. F you, Zeus. I'm going to be the strongest that's ever lived. Death, whatever, right? Yeah. But that's so, and I'm grateful that I get to choose. And to go back to your analogy, right? In the morning when you wake up and you think to yourself, like, man, it's Wednesday again, like hump day, it's Prince Spaghetti Day. I don't know, right? It's like do the same thing every single week. Be grateful that you get to choose, right? And if there's choices out there that you feel like you should make them, because the truth is you don't know.
Right.
And that's a beautiful place to be. In fact, somebody even call it a gift.
Sure. Yeah. Camus also says Sisyphus can decide to accept such a universe and draw from it his strength, his refusal to hope, and the unyielding evidence of a life without consolation. And so that line, that refusal to hope, is interesting, but we did talk about this, where hope and other means of escape from the reality, the otherwise tragic reality of pushing the boulder up the mountain, that is an escape, and that's looking for external meaning when the meaning is found in the task itself. And Camus also talks about this idea that once we are confronted with the absurd, there are three things that then pop up, and that is revolt, freedom, and passion. And so revolt is just that, what we talked about, right? This idea that, well, if I do enough of it, then eventually the rock will go to the top, or I'll, gain recognition, be whole, or whatever. I'll get enough money and all will be good. It will all be worth it. So it's basically the revolt part of it is refusing to escape, essentially, in his eyes. The freedom part of it is the acceptance of the circumstance, right? This is where you live without appeal to some higher order, right? Because Sisyphus, the tragic part of Sisyphus too is that the act isn't even super meaningful on its own. The boulder literally resets. I mean, I suppose if you're saying, well, I have this job, this dead end job that I'm cooking for someone. I mean, there is some meaning in like providing food for people, although like it doesn't have the most structurally sound meaning for you, sure, but yeah, but freedom from the fact that there is no higher appeal there, that the universe will not console you. And then passion, and passion is this extreme lucidity to life, this being awake, this presence in the now. And he argues that if someone can practice extreme passion while not appealing to a higher order, while not trying to dissolve the fact that maybe there is no meaning, then that is the absurd hero, as he puts it.
I love this. I mean, we talked about this. You brought it up in a podcast a while ago. We did it. Novelty, right? The finding something new. And let's go back to your analogy for this morning, right? This morning you are waking up and you're wondering, or you went to bed last night wondering, is this it? But inherently, if I drive to work today and I just choose to look at everything with a new lens, then yeah, that's it. But it's new and it's different and it's all we really need. And it escapes the absurd without appealing to the universe to give you the answer. You can just keep finding something new. He could keep pushing the rock up differently. He can keep looking at the rock differently. He can keep, working on the mountain differently. He all of this is possible. But I love it. It takes freedom first, resigning yourself to this is the reality of it. These are my cards, to use your analogy. This is the deck I was given. I'm going to make this deck the best deck there is. But I'm going to do it intentionally, with purpose, and not worry about when it becomes the best deck there is, and not worry about how many cards I have. I'm just going to keep playing the deck that I have.
Yeah, I love that. Obviously, we've spoken kind of at length on my feelings of like seeking depth in things, right? And so at the end of the day, Camus kind of is suggesting that in Sisyphus's engagement without illusion or even disillusion, his engagement with life, well, I suppose he's not living, but kind of, his engagement with his afterlife in the task without illusion is why he's happy, because he's engaged, right? And then the addendum that we would put in there was that, like, engage deeply, right? You had mentioned, maybe the rock has certain holds on it. Maybe the rock isn't perfectly smooth. Maybe there's certain holes. Maybe there's certain routes that are a little bit easier. Maybe he can do it faster. Maybe he can just get better at it. And maybe he can get better at it at an infinite degree for eternity. And that's kind of cool.
Just to get better at it.
Yeah.
Just to get better at it.
Just like a certain technique, right? Get really under there, right?
But you got to take ownership first. That's the revolt. Then you got to find freedom. That's the understanding that there is no hope because the answer is not coming. It's absurd to think so. Right. And then you got to find passion.
Right.
And I think he's spot on when you take those three things and you live a life, you start to live a life free of that tension. What's it matter? It's like that. What's the question? Like, do I go left or right? Which way are you going? I don't know. Oh, where am I going? I don't know. Well, do I go left or right? Well, why does it matter? Right? And why does really, when you break down the question that we started the conversation with, right, that why does the tension even exist? Read the question one more time.
How do we resolve the tension between our desire to find purpose and living in a universe which fails to provide us clear answers?
Yeah. So when you revolt and know that it doesn't matter. You find that freedom, and then you find purpose. That question dissolves away.
Sure. I'd also like to add the second addendum to, we talked about this before the podcast, but there might be a higher order. And that is a little hope, right? That is a little bit of external meaning, perhaps. But I do like the idea of, even if there is a higher order, who are we to decipher that? Who are we to decide? Who are we to be able to comprehend it? And so for those who might be spiritual or religious, I don't think that those can't coexist with ownership of your task, right? I think that you could have that little bit of you that says, okay, well, perhaps there is, or perhaps not. Perhaps there isn't a greater, higher divine order that I can't understand. But if there was, I certainly can't understand it. And therefore, the next best thing is to engage deeply with life in the present, right? Engage with it right now. And there isn't a better quality moment than another. There's no cosmic significance to our moment right here talking to each other, or you listening to this. This isn't a better or worse moment than you at the peak of a roller coaster, than you skydiving, than you...
And Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill.
Exactly. It's all here right now.
Yeah, well said. I think we can kind of wrap this up, because you said it best. Engaging, the purpose of life is to engage deeply with life. Maybe that's it. Maybe that dissolves the tension. And while it may be hard on days when it's hard, and easier on days when it's easy, ultimately engaging deeply with life is just as important on both sections. It's just as important to engage deeply pushing the rock up the hill as it is to walk back down the hill. And I think it's because we have something that Sisyphus doesn't have. We have it finite. Sisyphus can take years off from not engaging. He could be hopeless for months. He could do all the things for a long period of time and then still come back to what we're talking about. If we do all those things, we wake up one day and we go, man, the tension's still there. I wish I could figure out what the meaning of life is. But if we engage deeply every day, every opportunity we have, practice courage, not avoidance. That's the meaning. That's what Viktor was saying. So if you guys like this topic and you feel like somebody might benefit from it, we would encourage you to please share it with your friends, your family, anybody that's interested in this type of stuff. Check us out on Spotify. Like, share, subscribe, reach out. It means a lot to us when you do, and we look forward to hearing from all of you. Until next time.
Thank you.